In the history of crime, there are killers who leave no fingerprints, no face, and not even intent. And in 1988, the city of Shanghai confronted such a culprit. It was not a powerful synthetic poison, not a terrorist plot, but an ordinary street food served in thousands of taverns, family kitchens, and riverside stalls. Within just a few weeks, more than 300,000 people fell ill. Hospitals overflowed as if in wartime. Schools were shut down. The city entered a state of emergency. The press called it a yellow wave, referring to the jaundiced skin caused by hepatitis A. But medical investigators gave it another name, the Shanghai blood clam case. This is not merely a story about a species of seafood. It is a story about how a delicacy became a killer and why humanity continues to invite it back to the table. Long before it appeared in epidemiological reports, the blood clam was considered a gift of the elite. In traditional Chinese medical texts, it was described as a food that nourishes the blood and warms the yang, symbolizing vitality and prosperity. In imperial cuisine, blood clams were served alongside medicinal wines, regarded as a kind of essence of the sea. The logic seemed intuitive. Its deep red flesh aligned with the ancient belief that like nourishes like. Red meat strengthens the blood. High iron content fortifies the body. For coastal laborers, blood clams were a precious source of protein, affordable and easy to prepare. Yet that very cultural prestige discouraged generations from asking a crucial question. Where does that red color come from? And why does this species thrive in places even fish avoid? Few realize that its unique habitat, brackish estuaries, black mudflats, river mouths created ideal conditions for viruses and bacteria to settle and multiply. Centuries of reverence transformed an ordinary mollusk into a national delicacy, and that widespread popularity became the first link in the chain that led to the disaster of 1988. Hepatitis. A virus is so small that it would take 30,000 particles lined up end to end to equal the length of a single grain of salt. Yet, its resilience is extraordinary. It survives in seawater. It withstands stomach acid. It remains infectious for weeks at low temperatures. The unsettling truth is this replicates perfectly inside blood clams, not merely on the surface like dirt or debris, but within the cellular tissues themselves, where the clam's filter-feeding system captures and retains everything with uncompromising efficiency. The blood clam does not act with malice. It simply follows instinct, filtering water for survival. But that very biological mechanism inadvertently becomes a viral concentration station, where HAV is collected, compressed, and stored at concentrations hundreds of times greater than in the surrounding environment. In coastal waters contaminated by urban wastewater, the blood clam functions like a biological hard drive, recording and preserving everything that flows through it. Intestinal bacteria, decomposing organic matter, and some of the most dangerous pathogens in human history. Investigators at the time referred to HAV as the perfect accomplice, tiny, anonymous, and completely invisible. That winter, Shanghai celebrated the festival season as it did every year. Street-side eateries displayed trays of lightly blanched blood clams, an especially popular dish during the cold months. No one realized that each plate was, in effect, a loaded biological device. Within 3 weeks, tens of thousands of hepatitis A cases emerged. Authorities initially suspected ordinary food poisoning, but the appearance of jaundice, elevated liver enzymes, and the rapid rate of transmission revealed something far more serious, an unprecedented community-wide outbreak. As doctors traced the source of infection, they noticed a striking pattern. More than 80% of patients reported, "I ate blood clams last week." Public health officials followed the supply chain backward and uncovered a disturbing truth. The harvesting area for the clams was located at the mouth of a river, the very zone receiving the bulk of untreated urban wastewater. Levels of HAV in the water were abnormally high, and blood clams, as continuous filter feeders, had absorbed it all. The disaster was not caused by a single careless mistake, but by an urban system expanding faster than its ability to protect itself. By the time authorities imposed a complete ban on blood clams, it was too late. The virus had already spread to hundreds of thousands of people. The case was officially closed, but its consequences persisted for years. After 1988, blood clams became a food few countries were willing to touch. The United States imposed a total import ban due to the significant epidemiological risk. FDA reports describe blood clams as a high-risk product, comparable to raw foods that have not undergone sterilization. Yet, like many prohibited items, blood clams quickly resurfaced on the black market. In major Chinatowns, such as New York and San Francisco, law enforcement officers seized multiple shipments of smuggled blood clams transported in foam containers, labeled simply as fresh seafood. Demand never truly disappeared. For many Asian communities, the taste of blood clams carries memories that cannot easily be replaced. Meanwhile, Japan and South Korea allowed consumption only if the clams were farmed in systems with extremely strict wastewater control. This transformed blood clams from a common street food into something closer to a luxury product. Because maintaining a truly clean aquatic environment is expensive, the world effectively split into two camps. The control camp, arguing that the epidemiological risks are too high and inherently unpredictable. The cultural camp, insisting that outright bans amount to the destruction of culinary heritages, but regardless of which side one supports, one fact remains undeniable. Blood clams themselves are not malicious. It is the environment that nurtures them that determines the danger. The history of blood clams is not the story of a toxic seafood species. It is the story of a society that believed cultural tradition could override biological law, only to be reminded that biology always follows its own rules.